Welcome back, everybody.
It's good to be back.
Today we're diving into a story that's sending shockwaves through the true crime community. And honestly, it's a tough one to unpack.
It really is. It's one of those situations where the lines between the content we consume and the real lives of the creators get really blurry.
Exactly. And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about empathy, privacy, and the strange parasocial contracts that can sometimes develop between creators and their audience.
Yeah, the parasocial element is huge here and adds a whole other layer of complexity to it all.
Absolutely. So for those who haven't heard, we're talking about the downfall of Stephanie Harlowe and the uncertain future of the Crime Weekly show.
Right, and what makes this so compelling, so difficult, is that it hits close to home for true crime fans.
It really does. Stephanie and Derrick, her co-host, they had this incredible knack for delivering those chilling true crime stories, but always with a thread of humanity, you know?
Exactly. They appealed to those who want their facts with a side of, maybe a side of empathy.
Right, exactly. They weren't afraid to delve into the emotions behind the headlines, which is a big part of what made them so popular.
And I think that's why this situation has resonated so deeply with so many. It's because they brought that human element to everything they did.
And now suddenly, Stephanie is thrust into a real-life tragedy that mirrors the content she usually dissects.
Right, and it's put a spotlight on those parasocial relationships we were talking about. Fans feel like they know her, like she's a friend, so her need for privacy feels almost like a betrayal to some.
Yeah, I've seen comments like, you spend years digging into the lives and tragedies of others, but now you want privacy.
It's that expectancy violation thing in psychology, you know? It's like fans felt this unspoken agreement that by sharing other stories, Stephanie was obligated to share her own.
To fully grasp the situation, though, we got to rewind a bit, right? Stephanie's estranged husband, Adam, passed away very suddenly.
And the circumstances surrounding his death are still really murky, shrouded in ambiguity, which just fuels the speculation.
And in a move that I think shocked a lot of their fan base, Crime Weekly was immediately put on hold.
Which, yeah, on the surface seems like the right thing to do, right? Give her space to grieve, process everything.
Right, but it's not that simple. See, even before Adam's passing, their relationship wasn't some picture-perfect love story gone wrong.
No, not at all. There were already whispers, allegations of a toxic relationship, accusations flying from both sides.
Exactly. Whispers that existed online in those shadowy corners of Reddit forums and comment sections.
And this is where it gets really complicated because remember, we're dealing with fragments of information, speculation, rumors.
Right. But the fact remains, whispers of trouble in their marriage existed long before this tragedy occurred.
Exactly. So it's not as straightforward as some might initially think. This isn't just about a grieving widow being denied privacy. There's a whole backstory, a pre-existing narrative that we have to consider.
It's messy, complicated, and it brings up all sorts of questions about how we separate the content from the creator, especially in a genre as emotionally charged as true crime.
It really does. It's a tough situation all around, and it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
It will. But we should probably pause here for now.
Yeah, let's pick this back up in part 2.
And it's almost like their personal life was unintentionally feeding into the very content they were producing even before Adam's death.
Yeah, it's really strange when you think about it like that, isn't it?
It is. And speaking of narratives, I think it's important to examine the statements released by both Stephanie and Derrick.
Right. Absolutely. Their words really matter in this situation, and I think maybe even provide a glimpse into how they're navigating this whole thing.
So let's start with Stephanie's statement, which was short, raw, and you could just feel the raw emotion.
You could just tell she was hurting.
Exactly. And it focused primarily on her children and her need for privacy to protect them, which makes sense, right?
It does. Can you imagine being in her shoes? Having your world turned upside down and then having to process all of that grief so publicly.
And with the added layer of her career. She's the one usually dissecting these kinds of cases, not the one living through them.
It's gotta be surreal and probably incredibly overwhelming.
And this is where I think we see that tension between her public persona and her private grief.
Totally.
On one hand, you want to empathize with her. She's experienced this horrible loss. But on the other hand, there's this question lingering.
Does her job, her choice to delve into true crime change how we should view her request for privacy?
Right. It's a question a lot of fans are grappling with.
And it's totally understandable, too, because true crime fans, they connect with these hosts on a different level, you know?
It's a different kind of relationship, for sure.
It is. And I think this case really highlights the paradox at the heart of true crime.
How so?
Well, as fans, we demand authenticity from these creators, right? We want the rawness, the realness. But when their real lives become messy, when they don't fit into the neat little box we've created for them, we don't always know how to handle it.
It's like we forget they're human, too, with their own complexities.
Yeah, and their own baggage and their own struggles.
Now, in contrast to Stephanie's statement, Derrick's took a very different tone, wouldn't you say?
He was much more composed, much more focused on reassuring fans that the show would go on.
And reassuring them that Stephanie had his full support.
Yeah, he really went out of his way to emphasize that.
Which I thought was pretty big of him, especially in the midst of all this speculation and drama.
He could have easily stayed silent, let Stephanie deal with the fallout, but he chose to stand by her, and that says a lot about their relationship, I think.
I agree.
And honestly, it's what she needs right now. A friend, a colleague who has her back no matter what.
Absolutely.
I think it's also worth noting the contrast in their personalities, which kind of comes out in their statements.
Right. Like Stephanie's always been the more emotional one on the show.
Exactly. The one who really connects with the victims' families. The one who isn't afraid to shed a tear or two.
While Derrick, he's the voice of reason, the one who brings the logic and the analysis.
And you can see that dynamic play out in their statements, too.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder how this whole thing will impact their dynamic moving forward,
Oh, for sure. This is uncharted territory for them. And only time will tell how they come out on the other side of it.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, that's for sure. It really makes you think.
Yeah.
Like, where does Crime Weekly go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Can the show really recapture its magic after all of this?
And can Stephanie reclaim her narrative?
It's hard to say.
It really is. I mean, this whole thing, it goes beyond just one show or one host,
What do you mean?
Well, it kind of feels like a watershed moment for the whole true crime genre.
Yes.
Like it's forcing us to confront some tough questions about the ethics of it all, the human cost of these stories we consume.
Because for so long, it's been this kind of, unspoken agreement, right? We as consumers crave these dark, gritty stories, and creators, they deliver.
Exactly, and everyone's happy. But this situation, it shines a light on the inherent risk in that exchange.
The risk being that these creators, they're human too, right?
Exactly. They have lives, they have families, they experience loss and grief, just like everyone else.
And for Stephanie, that human side, it's colliding with her professional life in a very public, very messy way.
And it's putting fans in a weird position too, because on the one hand, it's like, of course she deserves privacy during this difficult time. But then on the other hand, there's this party that's like, wait, but you've built a career on sharing other people's stories. Why is yours any different?
It's that sense of entitlement that some fans feel, right? Like they're owed something.
Yeah. And as misplaced as that sense of entitlement might be, it comes from that intimacy that true crime fosters. That feeling of knowing these hosts personally.
Which brings us back to your earlier point about the parasocial relationship.
Right, because when you invite these voices into your home week after week, you start to feel like they're part of your life.
And when those lines get blurred, it's hard to separate the content from the creator.
Exactly. So we're left grappling with this question. How do we reconcile our insatiable appetite for true crime with the very real human cost of these stories?
That's a tough one. No easy answers.
No easy answers at all, but it's a conversation we need to have.
We do. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Always a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this complex situation. Head over to our social media pages. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious. And as always, thanks for diving in with us.